These are unprecedented times. The COVID-19 pandemic has reached all-time highs in every metric that we look at: number of cases, number of hospitalizations, and, sadly, the number of deaths. Layer on top of that the political as well as the economic turmoils, and we have real reasons for real stress. Every time I turn on the TV, there's more breaking news about why you and I should be even more stressed about the times that we live in. And while this is a stressful time for everyone, I think there are four groups of people for whom these days are even more stressful: our elderly and chronic condition populations, children and teens, our healthcare workers, as well as anyone with a mental health condition. Today I want to ask the question, is there biblical advice for these modern stressful times? We are in a series right now going through the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom. Today I'd like to consider how, from the book of Proverbs, how we might survive the stress of COVID-19. I think we'll find four biblical antidotes that we can rely on until those vaccines arrive. Let's take a look at four keys to reducing COVID-19 stress. And they all have a kind of interesting preacher's beginning. First, we want to line up. Second, we want to lighten up. Third, we want to loosen up. And fourth, we want to look up. Let's start with the first one, line up. What do I want to line up? I want to line up my priorities. Line up my priorities. Put first things first. Proverbs 17:24 tells us that an intelligent person aims at wise actions, but a fool starts off in many directions. Anybody identify with that verse? Now, I don't want to make light of the seriousness of the challenges we face today, but I really do believe that we should not allow the challenges of the coronavirus pandemic to overwhelm us. We need to prioritize our time with God each and every single day, realizing that He is in charge, even in charge over the pandemic sweeping the world. You know that when you line up your priorities. Proverbs 16:9 says we should make plans, counting on God to direct us. Proverbs teaches that you should think through your life, think through the direction of your life. It's amazing to me how so many people will write out a will, but they never ever in their entire lifetime bother to write out any life objectives or life goals. You're going to live your life either by your priorities or by the pressures. One of those two things, your priorities or the pressures of life, are going to control you. If you don't set your agenda, somebody else is going to. The news media, your boss, your family. What is it that is God's priority for you? Start each day with God. When Jesus was here, He modeled that for us. We read in Mark 1:35-38 from the New Living Translation that before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went out to find Him. When they found Him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." But Jesus replied, "We must go on to other towns as well, and I will preach to them too. That is why I came." You see, Jesus modeled this. One day, He was out praying, and the disciples went looking for Him. And they said, "Hey, everybody's looking for you. Let's get back to doing some more healing." But He said, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to another town." He set His priorities. We need to do the same thing. Line up your priorities. Secondly, we need to lighten up. What do we need to lighten up? We need to lighten up my attitude. You need to lighten up your attitude during these stressful times. The Bible teaches that stress is not an event. Stress is really an attitude. You could take two people, put them in the exact same stressful situation. One of them is cool and the other is uptight. It's not the event, it's how you handle it, how you respond to it. Proverbs 12:25 tells us that an anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. Lighten up. Don't take life so seriously. You know, humor is a great stress reliever. It's kind of like life's shock absorber. It doesn't change the situation, but it does change your perspective and helps you to handle it better. I really have loved Missy's attitude during this past week. She tested positive for COVID-19 last week, but no woe is me attitude from her. All week long, she's been posting jokes on her Facebook page, like the back and body hurts t-shirt, or the quip, life is like a helicopter. I don't know how to operate a helicopter. Or this one, I need to get back in shape, but I'm kind of waiting to see if the world is going to end before I put any real effort into it. Way to go, Missy. Way to lighten up. I don't know a more stressed out time than we are living in right now, but the Bible tells us to lighten up. Anxiety in a heart weighs a man down. In fact, Proverbs 14:30 says, a relaxed attitude lengthens a man's life. Do you know why that's so important? Well, simply this. Things don't always go as planned. In fact, the one thing that we know about 2020 is that nothing has gone as anyone planned it. They just don't. So here's rule number 1 in stress management. Don't stress the small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff. And here's rule number 2. It's all small stuff. You say, wait a minute, Mark, we're talking COVID-19. That's not small stuff. Well, it's all small stuff in God's eyes, right? It's minor by comparison to who He is. Proverbs 17:22 tells us being cheerful keeps you healthy. It's a slow death to be gloomy all the time. Isn't that a great verse? Being cheerful keeps you healthy. You know, medical research actually does confirm this. There are positive chemical changes that take place in your mind and in your brain when you laugh and when you smile. The thymus gland produces more T cells for immunities. The pituitary gland produces more endorphins, which is the body's painkiller. Your entire muscular system relaxes when you laugh and when you smile. Have you ever laughed so hard that you grow weak? Yeah, it relaxes you. You need to learn to see the humor in life. You need to learn to relax and laugh. So far, we've looked at the fact that we need to line up my priorities. And then secondly, we need to lighten up my attitude. Third, we need to loosen up. I need to loosen up. What is it that we need to loosen up? I need to loosen up my control. You need to loosen up your control. This is a challenge, especially to those of us who like to control things, who like to control our life. You know who I'm talking about. If you're a planner or you're a type A personality, some of us are like that. We just like to control things. But these days just seem really out of control. I'm going to admit to being one of those kind of people. 3 weeks ago, during our staff meeting, Brandy and I were having this conversation about, well, what would happen if one of us tested positive? What would we do? And with a bold attitude, I told her, let's not worry about it. It's Jesus' church, and He would see us through. Well, those were easy words. But 3 days later, I tested positive, and then I could not lead the church for 2 consecutive Sundays. You know, a lot of life these days is just out of our control. No matter what our planning, no matter what our determination, when we try to control what really is out of control, the natural result a lot of times is worry. Worry. Proverbs 12:25 tells us that worry is a heavy load, but a kind word cheers you up. You know, we always have a choice when it comes to worry. We can either choose to try to carry the heavy load ourselves, or we can transfer the load to where it belongs, to God, and allow Him to carry the load. That's where the kind word comes in. That's where prayer comes in. We can worry or we can pray. We can't do both at the same time. God says, give me the load. I can handle it. Here's how Jesus taught it in Matthew 11:25-30. He says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Here's the truth. None of us knows what's around the corner for us. That's what makes each day such a grand adventure. The excitement, really, of just not knowing. When we loosen up our control, we're just admitting the obvious, because we're really not in control. We're just out here surfing the waves, catching the wind, responding to life, making the best of it. But we're doing so knowing that we're doing it with God by our sides. So we need to do a few things so far, right? We're talking about the fact that we need to line up our priorities, that we need to lighten up our attitudes, and then we need to loosen up our control. There's one more thing I'd like to talk to you about today that is wisdom from Proverbs during these stressful times, and that is that we need to look up. Look up. We need to look up to God. We need to look up to God. Proverbs 10:27 tells us that reverence for God adds hours to each day. Isn't that a great promise? Are you stressed out because you just don't know how you're going to keep your job? A lot of us don't know how that's going to happen. And then there's others on the other side of the fence that we're just so busy, especially our healthcare workers. We just don't know how we're going to get everything done. The job is so big. Well, reverence for God adds hours to each day. This is the most important one of everything I'm talking about to you today. God says, stress is a warning light for you. And whenever I'm under stress, it means that I have taken my eyes off of the Lord. It means I've started looking at something or someone else. These days, it's really easy to look at the circumstances instead of looking at the Lord. Some of you would say to me today, I need more time. No, you don't. You don't need more time. What you need is more time with God. That's what you need, not more time. We all have the same amount of time, 168 hours a week. What you need is more time with God. That is what expands your day. This verse, reverence for God, adds hours each day. Consider that word reverence. What does reverence mean? It means simply that we take God seriously. He's not an afterthought. If I could, let me wrap up today's entire message to you in just 2 sentences. Because, we're in this coronavirus problem right now, and the reason that you're under the coronavirus stress when it hits is because either number 1, you take yourself too seriously, and number 2, you don't take God seriously enough. Those are the 2 sentences that wrap everything up for us today. You take yourself too seriously, and you don't take God seriously enough. That's how and why you get under stress. You take yourself too seriously, and you don't take God seriously enough. Are you making time to know God? I am not talking about taking time. I'm talking about making time. You say, I don't have time to sit down and pray every day. I don't have time to sit down and read my Bible every day. Well, then you're just too busy. You study the life of Jesus, and no matter how busy Jesus got, and there's never anyone who's ever been busier than him, he always took time to pray, because this is what leads us to trusting God. Probably the most famous verse in all of Proverbs, from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, says, trust the Lord completely. In everything you do, put God first, and He will direct you and drown your efforts with success. What do you have your eyes on today? This verse says that if you trust God, He's going to give you direction. He'll direct you. What are you looking at? Are you looking at the pandemic? Are you focused on what the news media is saying about it? Are you hoping for a political solution? Are you trusting in your employer? What is it that you're looking at today? The circumstances or the one who controls the circumstances? The one who overcomes the circumstances? You know, the traditional ending to Proverbs 3:6 is that God will make our paths straight, meaning also that He will direct our paths. But I love this Living Bible version, that He will drown our efforts with success. It means that if I loosen up my control and trust in God's control, I can enjoy great peace of mind because I'll be living the successful life that God has in mind for me, no matter how difficult, no matter how challenging life may be. Even when, by the way, that includes suffering. But with God, it's all drowning in His success for me. You know, you can pray these 4 points every single day. When you get up in the morning, you go in and you sit down in your easy chair or wherever it is that you read your Bible and you pray. You can pray something like this: Lord, help me today to line up my priorities, to make first things first. And Lord, help me today to lighten up my attitude and not to take life so seriously. And Lord, help me with my control issues. Help me not to hold on to control, because really you're the one who's in control. And finally, Lord, help me today to look to you and to reverence you and to take you seriously and to put you first in my life. You pray that every day and watch the difference it will make.